Statistics, Unit 1, Lesson 2, Favorite Classes Related. Now, what I thought would be more fun instead of doing the favorite classes related are your favorite classes related to Skittles? So I'm showing the answer key from the favorite classes related as far as the favorite elective classes versus core classes related, but on your worksheet in class, it's favorite Skittles. Same idea, same concept. All right, let's go ahead and look at what this is. So the first thing what we did is I went ahead and asked everybody, what's your favorite elective class? Art, music, physical education, foreign language, or technology? I went ahead and got the data, and I'm identifying the variables and the individuals. And remember, the individuals is my who. The who is actually the particular thing that I'm studying. And in this particular aspect, we are studying students in your AP statistics class. The what is the variable, and the variable is the favorite elective. So categorical variable versus quantitative variable. Remember, categorical variable shows categories, and the categories are the different types of electives that we have. Quantitative would be anything that would make sense to add, multiply, subtract, divide. And if I look at the categories, art, music, physical education, foreign language, that doesn't make sense to say art plus music equals anything. So those are categories. And all of my data is from the categories. So if you go to Staplet.com, you can go ahead and enter the class data, or you can go ahead and make it yourself. But Staplet.com is kind of neat. You go to, that is a categorical data. It'll ask you, and then you can go ahead and make a bar graph and a pie chart. So any single graph, you need to make sure you have a title, see bar chart, label, favorite elective, label, frequency, tick marks on the x-axis, which is art, music, PE, all of the labels, and then tick marks on the y-axis. And so I have my frequency to get the complete credit. So title, label, label, tick, tick, tick. You see on the pie chart, same thing. So I have my titles and I have my labels, and one thing I left out here, but you need to make sure you have is your key if I don't have it labeled, which I do have all of them labeled, so that's all I would need here. So if I didn't have them labeled, I would need a key of which one is which color is corresponds to each part of the pie. Okay, so the next part that I need to do is go to number 5. And it says sometimes it's helpful to investigate more than one variable. So we investigated what's your favorite, what is your favorite elective class? Remember, I investigated in class what's your favorite Skittle color, so it's going to look a little different. I just thought it was more fun because we could eat the Skittles. But in this one, it's asking what's your favorite elective. Then it says, of the art students, if you're an art student, tell me, are you an English person or a math person? Do you prefer English or math? So we went ahead and made this chart. And then I'm going to show you what all of these things are. First of all, the first one is called the percentage of all students who chose PE. And this is my marginal relative frequency. Marginal relative frequency is the relative frequency, or the percentage over the whole, that's why it's over 30, of the numbers in the margin. So when I look at PE is here, which is that 4 plus 3. 4 plus 3 equals 7, so that would be the number in my margin, and there's 30 students, so that is my marginal relative frequency. If I ask you of the marginal relative frequency of art, that would be 2 plus 4 is 6 over 30. Music would be the 5 plus 4, or 9 over 30. Foreign language, 1 plus 3, or 4 over 30. And technology would be 4 over 30 as well. Those in the margin. If I ask you for the marginal relative frequency amongst the core classes, you would add up math. 2 plus 5 plus 4 plus 1 plus 4. And I didn't do that in my head while I was doing that. So let's say 7, 8, 12, 16. So that's 16 math students over 30, and English would be 14 over 30. Remember, marginal relative frequency is all the numbers in the margin over 30. 30 is the total, okay? If I just ask for the marginal distribution, it would just be the numbers. So the second question asks, what's the percent of all students who chose math and art? So math and art is right there. Math and art, 2. And so math and art is 2 over all of them, and that's called joint relative frequency. So music and English. The joint relative frequency of music and English would be music, English, where they overlap, which is that 4/30, and so forth and so on. Finally, conditional relative frequency says what's the percentage of students who prefer math that chose tech? So we added up math already and we got 16. So I'm only wanting to look at the math part. And tech is, it said tech. So tech, I have 4 over the 16. So 4/16 would be my conditional relative frequency of the math students that those who chose tech, because I'm asking only of the math students. So all of these over 30 would be my conditional relative frequency of math. All right, the notes, also here we go. It says how many variables does the table have? And we have 2 categorical variables, elective and core classes. Now we have several aspects of the categories, but we have 2 categorical variables. And explanatory variable, which is on my x-axis, would be, and you see x in explanatory, that's how I remember it, is core class, and it could predict my favorite elective, which is response. So you see explanatory is here, which is my core classes on the x-axis, and then that's going to be my response is my favorite elective. All right, so Staplet.com also will graph everything for you if you go to there and put your data in. And remember, I'm doing 2 categorical variables, so that's what you go to Staplet.com, and then you'd go to 2 categorical variables, and you could enter the data to be able to get these particular graphs. On the AP test, you typically don't have to make graphs. Sometimes you do, but more often than not, you have to analyze the graphs that they have already given you. So again, we have to have, for a graph to have full credit, we have title, label, tick, tick, tick. I've got my title. I've got my labels on the x-axis, a label on my y-axis of frequency, and my tick marks where I have these. I have my key. So those are my tick marks. It tells me what the colors are for, and then I have my frequency on the y-axis. So the side-by-side bar graph just shows I have my math and my English, and I have a frequency. My segmented bar graph, notice it goes up to 100%. And I need to use my relative frequency of math. So I go to math and I say, okay, let's look at art. And I see math, art, remember this is over 16, so 2 divided by 16, and that's going to get me 12.5%. So that's art, color it. And then I look at technologies, 4 over 25, 4 over 20, which is 25%. Anyway, I just go ahead and use that conditional relative frequency. I basically see what percentage of all the math, and I make a segmented bar graph and go ahead and have the percentages. Guys, notice I don't really have a super detailed percentage. You don't need that much. Remember, on your free response questions, you only have 12 minutes to complete it. And you don't want to spend, if you do have to make a graph, you don't want to spend half your time doing the graph. So notice you just need 2 tick marks on each side whenever you have ones that have numbers. But again, title, segmented bar graph, label, math and English, label, relative frequency and percentages, and then your tick marks, which of course are your key in this particular one. All right, and then how did the bars in the side-by-side graph relate to the bars in the segmented graph? And obviously it's just saying, for this one, with math and English, if you can notice, the math looks like I have a really tall, like light blue one here. The light blue is the music, and it's much taller than in the English. But then when you look at the percentages, they look really similar. So it shows it based on the percentages. And you can see like the pink one, which is foreign language. In this one, English is a little bit bigger, but you can see actually on the percentage it's way bigger. So it shows a better representation because it's doing percentage and not the total number of people that are in there. So if you have more people that like math, your numbers are going to look a lot bigger just in the frequency graph, just because I have a bigger sample. But in the percentage, it breaks it down, and it's equal. Both of them are equal 100%, so it breaks it down where you can compare them much better. Is there an association between favorite course subject and favorite elective? If so, an association means that it is not independent. So if they're independent, these should be identical. If there's an association, what that means is if I said, hey, I want you to go to the subject, that you'll get a higher, if there's 100 people in a room that like math and 100 people in the room that like English, two separate rooms, and you have each of them distributed in this way, that they like art, music, PE, foreign language, and technology, and they're distributed in the way that the segmented bar graph is showing. And I said, I want you to go to the room that you'll have, if you randomly select one person, you'll have a higher percentage to be able to choose somebody that likes art. Well, then you look at this and you're like, well, art has a larger percentage in the English room than the math room, clearly. So I'm going to go to the English room. So there's an association of which room I should go to pick who's going to like art. So that's why we say, yes, there's an association, because these two graphs are different. If these two graphs are identical, if 20% of the people liked art that liked English, and 20% of the people liked art that liked math, and 10% liked music that liked English, and 10% liked English that liked math, music that liked math, then we would say, oh, wow, these graphs are identical. And identical graphs would mean they're independent of each other. There's no association of if English is going to be a higher art lover or music lover than the people that like math. But we do see that because they are different, there is an association. And we say, you know what, if you prefer math, you're more likely to choose technology. If you choose English, you're more likely to choose art. So yes, we're saying there's an association there. And then I went ahead, I did already answer number 11, that they would look the same if there was no association. No association we also call independent. If there's no association, you're independent. All right, our learning targets for today, I'll go ahead, you can pause my video and you can write this down, but it's everything that I already talked about as far as categorical data and relative frequencies. LT stands for learning target, so this is learning target number 2. Learning target number 3, watch out for misleading graphs. Watch out for if the vertical axis should always start at 0, and be careful of pictographs. I'm going to show you an example of that in just one moment. And then this is called a two-way table, variable 1 and variable 2, and the marginal relative frequency is exactly what I just explained, all of those in the margin. This particular is one example of marginal relative frequency, because of course if you had the total on the other ones, joint is when they're both overlapping, and then conditional is when I have one condition and the denominator is just of that condition. And remember, association between variables is when you have two variables knowing one affects the other. Okay, let me jump over to misleading graphs and let's look up a misleading graphs here. So misleading graphs. All right, let's look at some of these misleading graphs. So this is a popular misleading graph one. Here we go. This is good. All right, so if you notice, it looks like in 2010, on the one on the left one here, this one here, in 2010, they had way less. It looks like 2011 almost had 3 times the height of this particular topic. But if you notice, this is the problem, is that here, the bottom, it didn't start at 0. So it's just looking like it tripled it. Where the one on the right is more representative of the increase in 2011. It's just 10 more, so just as a small increase rather than the tripling, which this particular one looks like. So that's one of the things that it's saying, watch out for misleading graphs. Okay, and then another one is like a pictograph. Oh, like this one. Yes, this is great. So for this one, a pictograph, it's showing how much money each sport makes, and it's this cute little thing. But it shows basketball is about double of what baseball and hockey is. But if you notice, because it shows a length and a width, the basketball looks like it's like 4 times the average ticket price as baseball. And hockey looks like it's double what baseball. And in reality, baseball and hockey have about the same ticket prices according to this graph. All right, so those are misleading graphs. And I lost where I was. Give me one moment. Sorry about that. Okay, here we are, and we're back. All right, so the check for understanding, the answer here is you can look at it and you can see, explain why the graph is misleading, and so it's asking about this graph. and the vertical axis doesn't align at 0, just like the one I just showed you. And so yes, there's an increase, but when you actually graph it, you can see it's barely an increase. It's very, very small. But this one, on the one they gave us, makes it look like a huge difference. And then this next one asks what the proportion of houses were built in Pinewood Estates. And the ones in Pinewood Estates is a total of 60 over 220. That's a marginal relative frequency. So if I ask for the marginal relative frequency of neighborhoods, houses, then it would be 80 over 220, 80 over 220, and 60 over 220. So all of them. Shady Lane was 80 over 220. Oakcrest was also. Then if it asks, find the distribution of decades for the houses in this town using relative frequencies. And the relative frequencies in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, now in the decades, were the total, which the 60s, the total was 100 over 220. The 70s, the total was 90 over 220. And the 80s, the total was 30 over 220. Finally, what percent of homes were built in Oakcrest in the 1960s? And that's my joint relative frequency, where it's overlapping the Oakcrest and the 60s. And Oakcrest and the 60s, there's 60 houses over 220. Okay, that is it, and thank you for joining me.